On Thursday, August 29th, 2024, I'm at the East Ely, Nevada Engine House and Yard Complex of the Nevada Northern Railway, where Alco RS3 locomotive number 109 is about to roll out of the engine house and make its way over to the East Ely Depot to pick up its train. The 109 has been assigned as today's power to take the afternoon excursion train from East Ely up Robinson Canyon to the old mining district at Keystone near the nearby community of Ruth. A few minutes later, 109 is seen passing the nearby steam locomotive coaling tower and water tank as it navigates the yard trackage and makes its way to the depot. Shortly after, 109 is seen passing the repair-in-place building as it heads back toward the engine house to enter the depot lead track before moving down to the station to couple onto the train. Because of the track layout at the East Ely yard, the locomotive has to take a zigzagging course to get onto the depot lead so that it will be on the proper end of the train for the run-up Robinson Canyon. Built in November of 1950, this Alco RS3 diesel-electric locomotive was built for the Kennecott Mining Company's Ray Mine Division. It came to the Nevada Northern Railway in 1970 and has been operating on the railroad ever since. 109 also bears the distinction of being the only operating Alco RS3 in the western United States. The Nevada Northern Railway is truly one of the most unique railroad experiences in the country. Completed in 1906, this railroad connected the small mining towns of Ely, Ruth, and McGill and the nearby copper mines in the area, with the main line of the Southern Pacific Railroad almost 150 miles to the north, which it did daily for over 70 years until 1983, when the last remaining smelter along the line was closed. What makes the Nevada Northern Railway so fascinating is that its trackage and the entire repair shop, yard, and depot complex at East Ely are still 100% intact. After making its way to the depot, 109 briefly stops next to the water column, then slowly pulls forward to couple onto the train. What is unique about this locomotive is that 109 was built configured to run long hood forward instead of the more traditional short hood forward, as is typical for most diesel locomotives. Let's take a quick look at the consist for the passenger train. The rolling stock being used on today's train consists of Nevada Northern Caboose number 22, a flat car that has been rebuilt and converted into an open observation car, and two former interurban cars that were used in commuter service in Illinois. In just a few minutes, passengers will begin boarding the train for the 90-minute, 15-mile round-trip ride from East Ely to Keystone and return. As we climb aboard the train in preparation for departure for the run to Keystone, let's take an in-depth look at what this historic railroad has to offer. Shortly after leaving town, the train climbs up the steep grade heading into Robinson Canyon as it approaches Tunnel 1, just alongside the Lincoln Highway on the outskirts of Ely. Has been separate community railway regions over the years. Similar changes occurred in 2003 when the old Kennecott hill overpass was replaced with a modern concrete tunnel. After arriving at Keystone, the train backs into the Y and pauses for a few minutes before beginning the 7.5-mile return trip back to East Ely. The Keystone Y did not exist during the railroad's heyday as a copper ore hauler. It was constructed in the late 1980s following the railroad's reopening as a tourist line in 1987. As the train heads back downhill, we pass a group of ore cars that have been dumped into the nearby creek as riffraff to provide protection against floodwaters during severe storms.
It's called Western Riffraff.
Heading back downhill, we get a nice view looking out across the Steptoe Valley and the town of Ely. When the railroad was built, the main line originally ran right through the middle of the city of Ely. But a bypass line, which our train is now currently running on, was built many years later to eliminate the congestion that was caused every time a train had to run through the middle of the city.
He was my age. He was a freshman in high school when he did it. And they were, last I heard, they were trying to fight. They were very bad. They were very bad. I don't know.
The 10-car building is secured to people, created in their time for the two locomotives.
Yeah, he was
The museum is open daily from 10 to 4.
There's dead kids that were smart enough to stay out of trouble. But there were the ones that were dumb. Yeah. And we used to they hauled it to
After arriving back at East Ely, 109 cuts off the train and runs around the consist on a nearby siding so that the locomotive will be properly positioned on the front end of the train for this evening's scheduled operation of the Sunset, Stars, and Champagne train that is scheduled to run in just a few hours. The next afternoon, we're back at the East Ely Depot, where steam locomotive number 93 is coupled onto the passenger consist in preparation for the first of two scheduled afternoon runs from East Ely to Keystone and return. Number 93 is a 280 consolidation type locomotive that was built in January of 1909 by the American Locomotive Company at its Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania factory. It was one of the last locomotives to be built at the Pittsburgh works before the factory closed for good, and construction was relocated to the company's primary facility in Schenectady, New York. Number 93 has spent its entire working life on the Nevada Northern Railway, only ever leaving the property once for a special event. In 2002, number 93 was sent to the Heber Valley Railroad in Utah to help power a series of special excursion trains for the 2002 Olympic Games, which were being hosted in Salt Lake City. A short while later, we're back on board the train for another round-trip ride from East Ely up Robinson Canyon to Keystone and back. The train is approaching the Lackawanna Road grade crossing, one of only 2 railroad crossings in the city of Ely that are protected by modern crossing signals. The other is U.S. Highway 93, just east of the Easterly Depot.
Now, Clark Street, despite the complaints from those living along the street. Running through town, from the fact that the railroad had labeled their new depot Town Ely, rather than construct a depot downtown. Ultimately, the town sued the railroad. Resulting in the railroad constructed a depot downtown, renamed their depot to Ely City, and in late 1988 to East Ely, and constructed a bypass around town. We're traveling along that bypass now, and we'll meet the location of the original main line near the first town.
I will ask those of you who have windows. We'll pour into those windows. Not much, but a little bit. So just to give it a little heads up. What the tunnel has been subject to many railroad bridges over the years. The most recent occurring in 2003 overpass was replacing the modern concrete tunnel. No distance between this upcoming tunnel and Mansfield Avenue. This one is a little shorter again, looking towards East Village as we go through. And the little far out and it's not ready to get on the snow. Editor for Life magazine, traveled along Highway 50 through Nevada with just unsurprised by the other last
There's going to be a blue sign on Highway 50. There will be a pair of buildings tucked up a side valley above the road. Once upon a time, you could purchase actual sticks of dynamite from your local hardware store. But storing dynamite in town was rather dangerous. So one of the local hardware stores constructed a shed outside of town for safety. The concrete shed was for the storage of dynamite itself. The metal shed behind for the blasting house.
As the train departs Keystone for the 7.5-mile run back to Ely, you may notice an old-time looking cemetery just off to the left-hand side of the tracks. This, along with the nearby gallows, was built as part of an old western town built as a backdrop to serve for special events that the railroad hosts throughout its operating season, some of which will often include train robberies. The train crosses back over Lackawanna Road as it heads for East Ely Junction to make the reverse move back into the East Ely Depot. Look off to the right-hand side of the tracks as we cross over the road, and if you look carefully, you'll notice a deer grazing in the nearby field.
Right is the backside of the East Ely Yard complex. Cars and sales of locomotives were painted in this building. The large breaking stone structure behind the paint shop is the machine shop and engine house. Originally built in 1907, expanded in 1917, and rebuilt in 1941. This is where all major work on the locomotives is done and where the cars were not in service.
After making a brief stop at the junction in order to blow down 93's boiler and to change direction, the train makes a backup move through the East Ely Yard complex to head for the engine house, where it will briefly stop to deboard passengers for the 2:30 p.m. afternoon guided tour of the facility before pulling forward back to the depot to disembark the remaining passengers. As we pull in, if you look off to the main line heading towards the depot, you can see a pair of fully functional wigwag signals. These wigwag signals were featured in the TV series Ultimate Restorations. As the train backs through the yard, we pass the scale track where the loaded ore cars would come to be weighed after being sent down with ore loads from the mines near Ruth. The cars would come here to get their tonnage weighed before being sent north on fully loaded ore trains to head for the Southern Pacific Interchange at Cobre. Sitting on a nearby spur is one of the railroad's original wooden-built ore cars. Shortly off in the distance is the railroad's coaling tower and water tank. While the coaling tower is fully intact, it is not currently operational. However, the railroad does have a long-term goal to rehabilitate the tower and put it back into active service. As the train approaches the coaling tower, we look off to the left-hand side and see the wooden scale house. In the distance is the East Ely Depot, and sitting on the yard tracks between the train and the station is a massive fleet of the railroad's original ore cars. These cars are all original to the Nevada Northern Railway. As we back through the yard, we also pass one of the two water columns that are placed throughout the complex to service the line's two active steam locomotives. As we continue to back through the yard, we pass a pair of the railroad's original wooden box cars, along with a drop-bottom gondola car, a Jordan spreader, some more hopper cars, and a former U.S. Army troop car sitting on a nearby track. As we pass the RIP, or Repair in Place building as it is otherwise also known, we notice that one of the stall doors is open. If you look inside, you'll see one of the railroad's original wooden coaches. These cars were originally used on the railroad's Steptoe Valley Flyer passenger train. Following the railroad's reopening in 1987 as a tourist operation, the original wooden passenger cars were placed into service and were used on the regular excursion train until fairly recently, when they were removed from service due to their age and condition. If you look inside the building through the giant glass windows, you can see some more of the railroad's historical equipment. Sitting inside the RIP building on the opposite end is a flat car carrying Steptoe Valley Mining Company steam locomotive number 3. This is the fourth and smallest of the Nevada Northern's 4 steam locomotives. The locomotive is currently awaiting its turn in the shop for restoration so that it can be returned to active service. As we approach the engine house, we see the railroad's Plymouth diesel switches sitting outside one of the open stall doors, along with some more of the railroad's vintage freight car collection, and a former Southern Pacific hydro cushion boxcar sitting outside the paint shop. By coincidence, this car is not the only piece of Southern Pacific equipment that calls this railroad home. As we approach the south end of the yard, we see Nevada Northern SD9 number 204 sitting outside the machine shop. This locomotive was built by EMD in 1956 as Southern Pacific number 5468. The locomotive was rebuilt and converted to an SD9E in the 1970s and was given the number 4426. It became number 204 when it was acquired from the Southern Pacific by BHP Nevada Mining in 1995 and was brought to the Nevada Northern shortly after, following the reopening of one of the copper mines near Ruth. The locomotive was left behind and donated to the Nevada Northern when the operation shut down in 1999 and has called the railroad its home ever since. Sitting in the brush behind the locomotive shop is another Alco RS3. The locomotive is owned by the Nevada Northern Railway, however, it is not currently operational. Upon arrival back at the depot, 93 is quickly cut off the train and then proceeds over to the Y in order to be turned around in preparation for the second scheduled run of the afternoon. We see number 93 heading off to the Y in order to be turned, and then we see it coming back through the yard on its way back to the depot to be coupled onto the train in preparation for the second scheduled run after being turned. After 93 completes her runaround procedure, she pulls back up to the depot and then stops at the water column in order to take on water before the next scheduled run.
Missed by that much. You have to be pretty old to know what TV series that came from.
Once the locomotive has taken on water, number 93 slowly rolls back down in front of the depot to couple back onto the train. The brakeman can be seen standing on the ground next to the caboose, giving hand signals to the engineer. Now let's take a look at the inside of the machine shop and engine house of the Nevada Northern Railway. Sitting on the right-hand side of the machine shop as you walk in through the door is Nevada Northern car number 9. This is a former Ontario Northland coach car that was acquired by the railroad in the 2000s. Sitting on the opposite side of the machine shop is Nevada Northern number 81, which is currently undergoing some boiler repairs. Built in 1917 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, this 280 consolidation is the largest of the 4 steam locomotives on the Nevada Northern. Next, we move on over to check out the Nevada Northern East Ely engine house. Built in 1907, just 1 year after the railroad arrived in Ely, the facility contains a total of 6 tracks, each of which is able to accommodate 2 locomotives at the same time. Sitting at the back of engine house stall number 1 is Nevada Northern number 40. Built in 1910 by Baldwin, this 460 10-wheeler is currently in a complete state of disassembly as it is undergoing the FRA-mandated 1472-day or 15-year inspection, which will allow the locomotive to be legally certified for continued operation. In addition to being the queen of the Nevada Northern steam fleet, number 40 also bears the distinction of being the official steam locomotive of the state of Nevada. Currently occupying the space in stall 1 of the engine house in front of number 40 is the tender from number 81. The tender is currently being stored inside the engine house while the locomotive itself undergoes the necessary boiler repair work inside the machine shop. Currently occupying the adjacent track in stall 2 is number 109, the very locomotive that was powering our train the previous day. Stall number 3 is currently empty because this is where number 93 resides when the locomotive is not powering the regular excursion trains. Sitting on the adjacent track is Nevada Northern Alco RSD4 number 201, the last remaining Alco RSD4 locomotive in existence. It is currently occupying space next to Baldwin VO 1000 number 801. Number 201 is currently awaiting restoration, while number 801 is operational. Sitting directly behind the 801 is the railroad's wrecking crane that was built in 1907 and is used for special occasional demonstrations. Currently occupying space in stall 6 on the opposite side of the wrecking crane is Alco RS2 locomotive number 105. Sitting at the back end of engine house track number 5 is the railroad's 1907 rotary snowplow, which is currently sitting next to one of the railroad's vintage wooden boxcars. The 2 tracks over to the right-hand side of the plow are occupied by one of the open-air passenger cars, which is currently being rebuilt, another one of the railroad's many ore cars, and of course number 40. Let's take a more in-depth look at the 201 before heading to the blacksmith shop. This Alco RSD4 was built in 1951 and served the Nevada Northern faithfully for 30 years before its retirement in 1982. After which it was donated to the Northwest Railway Museum in Washington State, where it resided until it was reacquired by the Nevada Northern in 2021.
Why are you hanging metal off the ceiling? That's unsafe. That's dangerous. In all reality, these are made out of wood. These specifically are wood foundry patterns from the McGill smelter. And so when everything shut down in 1983, Kennecott had basically laid these on the side of the road and told the residents of McGill to use them as firewood.
Oh,
Good luck with that one.
On our way back to the hotel, we pause in the downtown area of Ely to check out the original Ely Depot. After the main line was routed away from its original route through the middle of the city, ownership of the building was acquired from the railroad by the city of Ely, and it now serves as the Ely Chamber of Commerce. Because the town of Ely and East Ely were originally two separate communities when the Nevada Northern arrived on the scene in 1906, the railroad had to build separate stations in each of the two communities so that both towns would have access to the outside world by rail.
Look at the flock of deer going by. Herd deer.
A couple of hours later, we are back at the East Ely Depot just in time to see number 204 pulling up from the engine house as it slows down and then briefly stops next to the water column before pulling forward again to couple onto the passenger consist. The locomotive has been assigned to provide power for tonight's operation of the Nevada Northern Star Train. The Star Train is a special themed train operated by the Nevada Northern in conjunction with the Great Basin National Park. Upon departure from East Ely, the train proceeds northward up the Steptoe Valley about 10 miles to a stargazing viewing area set up along the railroad right-of-way. The area is equipped with telescopes that are provided by personnel from the Great Basin National Park. The round-trip journey takes approximately 3 to 4 hours. After 204 couples onto the consist, the locomotive backs up just a few inches in order to pull out the remaining slack from the couplers in between the cars. Meanwhile, as the number 204 is being prepared for tonight's operation of the Star Train, number 93 can be seen making its way through the yard as it heads for the engine house where it will tie up for the night. Unfortunately, due to conditions out of my control, I was not able to get much footage on board the Star Train on this trip, so what you're about to see is all I was able to get.
Hi everyone. So our scientists in park.
On Sunday morning, September 1st, we find ourselves back at the Lackawanna Road grade crossing in preparation to catch the 11 o'clock morning excursion on its round-trip run to Keystone. In this footage, you can see the train backing out of the East Ely Depot towards the main line, where it will change direction to start making the run up Robinson Canyon to Keystone. The remaining footage you are going to be watching for the rest of the duration of this video was recorded over a 2-day period during Labor Day weekend.
rode yesterday?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah.
Pretty cool.
And, any museum or heritage railroad like this, if it's got an operating steam locomotive, oh yeah. When it comes to trains, steam locomotives are my particular passion. They've got a couple up in Portland that operate for special events. From Lackawanna Road, we move on to the next location at a site known as Dale's Crossing. The crossing is named after one of the local residents of the town who regularly rides his bicycle up to this remote location from his home to greet the train as it makes its regular round-trip run between East Ely and Keystone. Our next location after Dale's Crossing is a turnout just off of US Highway 50 at the west portal of Tunnel 1. Number 93 is putting out lots of stack talk during the climb uphill as it approaches the east portal of Tunnel 1. Farther up the line, we see the train getting closer to Keystone as it passes the siding at Lane City. This was the site of a small mining town in the 1800s until the town was abandoned in the late 1880s after the mine that the settlement supported played out. Shortly afterwards, we catch the train arriving at Keystone, where it will turn around for the trip back to East Ely. Once the train clears Keystone siding, the train will pull past the west switch of the Y and then stop before backing into the Y tail track, where it will then pause for a few moments before pulling east again to head back to Ely. The Y is controlled by all spring-powered switches, which eliminates the need for the brakeman to climb down off the train to throw the switches manually. During the Nevada Northern's heyday, Keystone was the staging area for the loaded ore cars coming into and out of the mines daily. The cars would be brought here from the mines and assembled into trains before being taken to Ely to have their tonnage weighed, and from there the carloads would then go on to the smelter at McGill for processing. Once the ore was processed at the McGill smelter, the carloads would then be taken to the Southern Pacific Interchange at Cobre for delivery to customers all over the country. After briefly pausing on the Keystone Y for a few minutes, the train pulls forward out of the tail track and back out onto the main line for the 7.5-mile run back to the East Ely Depot. Because the return trip to Ely is all downhill, the crew doesn't have to work the locomotive as hard in order to keep the train moving. We are once again set up near Lane City as the train makes its way back down through Robinson Canyon heading east towards the Ely Depot. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see an old discarded wooden railroad tie that was left behind by maintenance crews after being replaced. Because the average running speed of the train was only between 10 and 15 miles per hour, we were able to get some pacing footage of the train along US Highway 50 as it headed back towards East Ely. After briefly pacing the train for a short stretch along the Lincoln Highway, we jump back ahead of it to Tunnel 1 to get one last shot of the train exiting Robinson Canyon on the return to East Ely. After the train enters Tunnel 1, we leapfrog ahead of it again back to Dale's Crossing to get this shot of the train drifting downhill back into the Steptoe Valley with the town of Ely as the backdrop. From Dale's Crossing, it's a quick dash back to the grade crossing at Lackawanna Road to get one final shot of the train in action. Once the train clears Lackawanna Road, it's time to hop back in the car for the 2-day drive back to Southern California. This will conclude our in-depth look at the operations of the Nevada Northern Railway, and we hope you enjoy tagging along with us in this video. Until next time, thanks for watching.